One of the most important aspects to how well a Pokemon will do in competitive Pokemon are natures. Having the best nature on your Pokemon will impact how it can actually be utilized to handle other Pokemon on an opponent's team. In today's video, I want to discuss the top 10 natures in competitive Pokemon, and why you should be considering these as well. I'll be going over some of the best users of these natures as well, so you'll be able to use these natures on the strongest Pokemon possible, whether you're playing in BDSP or Sword and Shield. So with that said, let's just hop right into the video. Coming in at number 10 on this list, we have none other than the Adamant nature. Adamant nature boosts the user's physical attack while lowering its special attack. This makes Adamant best used for a Pokemon that's exclusively using physical moves, since if you're using this on a mixed attacker, such as Infernape, you'll lower the damage from your special attacks. While Adamant isn't used a lot in OU due to most Pokemon opting for either more defensive natures or something that will boost speed, Adamant still definitely has some absolutely terrifying users. If you're a fan of Pokemon such as Rillaboom, Scizor, or even Melmetal, you'll be able to truly capitalize on these Pokemon's strengths with this nature. Rillaboom and Scizor both have strong priority options they can take advantage of, which is extremely useful with something like Adamant, since Grassy Glide and Bullet Punch will attack before a majority of moves anyway. Your speed being faster with a nature such as Jolly wouldn't actually matter. Pokemon like Melmetal, meanwhile, benefit from something such as Adamant due to the extremely high base 143 attack, and also the fact that Melmetal having only base 34 speed will not really benefit from boosting its speed anyway. Our next nature on today's list is none other than the Modest nature. Modest nature has a lot of the same drawbacks and benefits of Adamant. However, you'll have a couple benefits that physical attackers have to face. The first being that physical attackers have to deal with the ability Intimidate, and with Landorus Therian and Incineroar being the most common Pokemon in singles and VGC for Sword and Shield respectively, this helps special attackers thrive a lot more in competitive Pokemon. Another massive benefit special users with Modest have over physical ones with Adamant is the fact special users don't have to actually worry about a status dropping their offense, as physical users have to worry about burns. If you like using Pokemon such as Regieleki, Volcarona, or Heatran in competitive Pokemon, you'll be able to destroy teams with a Modest nature. Regieleki is the fastest Pokemon in the game, and can even with a Modest nature typically outpace your opponent's Choice Scarf user, so you don't really need to worry about speed unless you're worried about other Regieleki. Volcarona, meanwhile, has Quiver Dance, which is amazing for boosting your speed stat. On offensive Volcarona spreads, Modest is definitely the preferred nature. Finally, Heatran, having a strong 130 special attack stat, can be a pretty terrifying breaker if you choose to run the Modest nature. Coming in at number 8, we have none other than the Naive nature. This is the first speed boosting nature on our list, however it actually has a small detriment when compared to others that ranked higher. Naive nature is great for mixed attackers. However, there aren't actually a lot of Pokemon that actually appreciate running this nature. Naive is a great option though in order to allow diversity in a moveset, since you can bluff being a physical or special option, and then can take advantage of an opponent switching in a wall that doesn't actually handle your set properly. Naive lowering your special defense isn't exactly great, but there are very few priority options that are specially offensive. So it's at least better than a nature such as Hasty, which lowers your physical defense stat. While there aren't a lot of strong users of this nature, the few that do utilize this are absolute monsters in their respective tiers. Dragapult and Victini can utilize Naive in order to dominate most teams they'd fight against, especially Dragapult, which actually relies heavily on being able to use both Shadow Ball and Dragon Darts on sets that aren't choice specs. If you're playing BDSP OU, however, Infernape is by far the mixed attacker in that tier. Being able to use options such as Fire Blast or Grass Knot in tandem with close combat makes Infernape an absolute monster to switch around. Coming in at number 7, we finally got into our first more defensive nature, being Impish. While I typically rate options to either benefit or handle special offense more highly, Impish is actually our one major exception, specifically when we look into threats for the OU tier. Besides Scizor, typically physical attackers looking for a more defensive nature will opt to actually run the Impish nature instead. This mostly is due to a lot of common checks in OU, to Landorus or Weavile being physical attackers as well, with strong coverage for the pair. Typically you'll run a Rocky Helmet on Impish nature Pokemon in order to help assist in their job checking these monsters. But in tandem with the more physically defensive nature, you'll be able to check some of the best physical options in OU. Some of our stronger users of this nature come in the form of Landorus Therian, Garchomp, and Buzzwole. Buzzwole typically is utilized specially for the Landorus Therian and Weavile combination, as it's one of the few Pokemon that can handle both options reliably. Garchomp's typically used with Rocky Helmet and Rough Skin to wear down U-turn users, or function as a soft check to Pokemon such as Hawlucha and Melmetal. Finally, Landorus typically actually runs this nature with leftovers or Rocky Helmet in order to check Pokemon such as Excadrill, and even opposing Landorus Therian if you're running Toxic. While typically natures that help defensively or offensively with special attacks are more beneficial, Impish is definitely the exception to this rule. Our sixth best nature comes in the form of the Bold nature. We have a bit of a streak regarding defensive natures here, with our next one being yet another physically defensive nature. Bold is basically doing the same job as Impish. However, this actually does benefit your special offense. Bold will typically be run either on defensive options utilizing specially offensive moves, or Pokemon that rely on either Foul Play, Seismic Toss, or some other move that doesn't use their offensive stats to deal damage. This is mostly to help with the occasional foul play from more defensive options, as any way to limit the damage you take from even a single extra move is vital to defensive Pokemon. As far as Pokemon that typically take advantage of the Bold nature, you can look no further than some of the best defensive Pokemon in OU actually. Pokemon such as Mew, Slowbro, and Blissey all actually rely heavily on the Bold nature. Typically, Mew and Slowbro will function as your fighting type checks on a team, as they're both extremely physically defensive psychic types. As for Blissey, Bold is typically run because you should be able to avoid a 2-hit KO from every special attacker anyway, even without investing into your special defense. Blissey having only 10 base defense means that it actually needs the Bold nature to even stand a chance against neutral hits, which is why you'll typically see the Bold nature ran on this specially defensive behemoth. Starting off the top half of this list, the number 5 best nature is none other than the Calm nature. Our best nature to boost your defenses. Calm nature is the strongest way to handle special attackers. Calm will boost your special defensive stat while dropping your physical attack. You'll not only have the ability to check special attackers more easily, but you'll also have the same benefits Bold does of dropping your physical attack stat, making this the ultimate defensive nature. Some great abusers of this nature are Pokemon such as Clefable, Heatran, and Slowking Galar. Slowking Galar typically will pair this with an Assault Vest, making this one of the strongest special pivots in the entire game. Meanwhile, Clefable and Heatran will opt for leftover sets. Clefable typically is best utilized to handle dragons like Dragonite and Dragapult, as well as other offensive Pokemon. Meanwhile, Heatran typically is used to handle options such as Volcarona, Dragapult, and Tornadus Therian. Coming in at number 4, we have the Brave nature. Brave will boost your physical attack stat while reducing your speed stat. Brave is typically used for offensive options that want to run primarily physical options, and either are being used on Trick Room or want to run a special attack on their moveset as well. Brave is typically a nature you'd see more so in VGC. However, it has uses on some teams and singles as well. When looking for options to use Brave as a nature, I would typically look at options such as Aegislash, Glacier, and Alolan Marowak. Aegislash is typically used on both Trick Room teams, as well as an option to run both physical and special attacks. With 150 in both offenses, why limit what moves you run? Glacier and Alolan Marowak, meanwhile, are strictly run on Trick Room teams. You'll see Glacier as the typical Trick Room breaker for VGC. Meanwhile, Alolan Marowak will actually be an essential Pokemon when running Trick Room in singles. Our third best nature is none other than the Quiet nature. Quiet boosts your special attack in favor of reducing your speed, similar to Brave. Quiet is our offensive Trick Room nature for special attackers, which actually dominate the VGC metagame. You'll still see this run in singles, however, similar to Brave, you'll typically see this more in doubles. Some of the strongest options for this ability come in the form of Hatterene, Torkoal, and Indeedee. Typically, you'll see more offensive options for Hatterene running Quiet as a way to do more damage on Trick Room builds. When partnered with Indeedee in doubles, this size spam core is rather deadly, as both Pokemon will utilize Expanding Force with Quiet natures in order to shatter teams. Torkoal, meanwhile, will run Quiet in both singles and doubles on Trick Room, as a choice specs Eruption from one of the fastest Pokemon under Trick Room. While also being boosted by the Sun, it will absolutely destroy a vast majority of opponents. The second best nature on today's list comes in the form of Jolly. Jolly nature boosts your speed while dropping your special offense, which is amazing on some of the top Pokemon in singles. Jolly is the simplest form of speed control a team can have, as you'll be able to make sure that besides moves such as Thunder Wave, Trick Room, Tailwind, or Sticky Webs, that you go into a 1v1 having the best chance to outspeed your opponent as possible. Some of the best abusers of Jolly are Pokemon such as Landorus Therian, Weavile, and Urshifu. Urshifu forms typically run Jolly due to their signature moves doing enough damage, and it helps them actually outpace some key Pokemon such as Landorus, which makes up a majority of OU teams. Landorus Therian typically runs Jolly to speed tie other Landorus forms, in order to knock off or toxic them to hinder their ability to succeed. Weavile will usually opt for Jolly in order to have the speed advantage over your opponent, as 125 speed is able to outpace a majority of Pokemon in OU, with Ice Shard usually being able to pressure anything that's faster. Finally, the best nature in Pokemon is none other than the Timid nature. I've been saying that typically natures that favor special attackers, in my opinion, should rank higher on this list, and Timid takes the cake. Not only does this boost your speed, similarly to our second best nature, Jolly, you also actually drop your physical attack. This is beneficial as you don't harm either of your defensive stats, while making sure to do as much damage as possible with special attacks. Some of the best offensive Pokemon in the game will greatly benefit from this ability. Pokemon such as Tapu Koko, Tornadus Therian, or Whimsicott are extremely potent options for Timid. Tornadus Therian and Tapu Koko prove to be devastating pivots in the single metagame, with their speed boosting natures allowing them to outpace a majority in the metagame. Whimsicott, meanwhile, is easily one of the strongest Timid users in VGC, which allows it to use moves such as Tailwind or Taunt faster than practically every other user of either move, making it one of the strongest utility Pokemon in the metagame. Well, that's my list of the top 10 best natures in competitive Pokemon. While you could probably end up utilizing any nature on the right Pokemon, these 10 I felt were the easiest to use in competitive Pokemon while having very little drawbacks. But I want to hear from you though. What do you think about this list? Be sure to comment yours down below. And if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for more content like this.